Morning, Botai. Today is Erev Tisha B'Av, so there are several pertinent halachot that apply today, so please listen carefully. The Rama quotes Rabbeinu Isaac Tirna in his Minhagim, who says that on Erev Tisha B'Av it's inappropriate to just walk around for a stroll. Like a tiyul, a person shouldn't do that or take a trip. It's best to stay put, learn Torah, prepare for Tisha B'Av, and not just go around. Now, everybody knows that today there is a very fateful meal called Seudah Mafseket. Seudah Mafseket is the last meal before Tisha B'Av. This meal has several halachot. First of all, the Gemara says that you're not allowed to eat meat or drink wine during this meal. Now, obviously, we've already been abstaining from that, lefi minhag, from Rosh Chodesh Av, but this is according to halacha, no meat, no wine. The minhag also during this meal is not to have fish or alcoholic beverages either. Now, another halacha about this meal is that the Gemara says you can't have two tavshilim. You can't have two cooked foods during this meal, only one. Now, as we're going to see soon, baked goods, fresh fruits and vegetables do not apply. You can have as many as you want. We're talking about specifically cooked foods. Now, in order to constitute Seudah Mafseket, the Poskim is quoted by Maran Shulchan Aruch and Siman Taf Kuf Nun Bet, says that there are two prerequisites in order to consider this meal Seudah Mafseket. Number one, it has to be held after Chatzot Hayom, which means past 1 p.m. today. And number two is that it has to be the last meal of a settled character before Tisha B'Av. If any of those two things are missing, which means if a person before Chatzot wants to have a meal, even if it happens to be his last meal before Tisha B'Av, but if it's before Chatzot, he can have as many cooked foods as he wants. Or even if it's after Chatzot, but he plans on having a settled meal later before Tisha B'Av, he can also have multiple tavshilim. Now, sometimes what people do is before Tisha B'Av, when it's getting closer to Tisha B'Av, they have a full meal with a bunch of cooked foods. At the end of the meal, either before or after Birkat HaMazon, they sit down on the floor, they take an egg, and they say, this is Seudah Mafseket. That is Asur Lefi Halacha. I'll tell you why. Because you've already had plenty of cooked foods, or even if you had just one cooked food during the meal, an egg is another one. And now it's just part of your meal. Even if you just did Birkat HaMazon, it still reverts back to the Seudah Mafseket. The Tur says, Matei Yudah quotes from L'Halacha, as does the Kaf HaChaim, the Seudah Mafseket is the last settled meal, Seudat Keva, that you had before Tisha B'Av. So if you're just snacking afterwards, that Seudat Keva was your Seudah Mafseket, and you weren't allowed to have retroactively, you couldn't have had two meals. And therefore that would be Asur. And if you said Birkat HaMazon and then She'akol on the egg, that's called the Bracha She'ena Tzricha. Besides for the issue of eating two cooked foods during Seudah Mafseket, you made an unnecessary Bracha of She'akol on the egg. And therefore, that's incorrect. Even for those who want to have eggs or lentils, as the Shulchan Aruch says, it's ma'achal avelim, it's food for mourners. The proper way to do it is as follows. Please listen carefully. Many people have asked, so I'm going to explain the proper procedure to be able to eat a full lunch or whatever it is, and then the Seudah Mafseket. Preferably, a person can, to eat a lot of cooked foods before Chatzot. That's the best way, because then you have no issues whatsoever. Or, even if it's after Chatzot, but you go and pray early mincha, that's also the mincha serves as a ifsek. Most people, if they're working today or whatever it is, won't be able to pray early mincha. Listen carefully to what the Mishnah Berurah says to do in Seif Katan Kaf Bet. It says as follows. L'halacha, you're supposed to eat early enough during the day, early enough in the afternoon, then you can have your full lunch, a bunch of cooked foods, whatever it is, but give yourself time afterwards to get hungry again, not just to have a snack before Tisha B'Av, but give yourself enough time to get legitimately hungry enough that you'll sit down and have another Seudat Keva, another set meal before Tisha B'Av, which means, let's assume for a second that you want to have a bunch of cooked foods. You want to have a nice lunch. So over there, 4, 5 o'clock, whatever it is, you can eat that. Now, between 4 and 5 o'clock, and then later, fast starts at about 8:15, so you have a good few hours, so that gives you enough time to get hungry again. Preferably, says the Mishnah Berurah, go pray mincha early. Most of the Knesset have earlier mincha today, as we do at about 6:30. You'll eat your meal, you'll make a Birkat HaMazon, you'll go pray mincha. By the time you go and come back and get settled and whatever it is, you'll get hungry again, and then you'll sit on the floor and have your legitimate Seudah Mafseket. You can have your bread and your egg or your lentils or your one cooked food. Over there it will be mutar, and that will be considered your Seudah Mafseket, which means retroactively, the meal that you ate before with several cooked foods will have been behetir velo beisur. That's with regards to that. As we said, The minhag is to have Seudah Mafseket sitting on the floor in a dark, gloomy part of the house. The Shulchan Aruch brings down that Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai used to have the minhag. You would sit down like vedome ki mish metom mutal lefanav, sitting next to a deceased relative, which means a very sad, gloomy time. Also, if a person can, you shouldn't sit together for Seudah Mafseket, so as not to be mitchayev bezimun. Sit separately, different places in the house, so that you don't sit together and have to say zimun. And that is with regards to that. The halacha is that even after Seudah Mafseket, you don't accept the fast unless you said so specifically, unless you verbally said, I accept the fast. As long as it's a few minutes before Shki'ah, you can still, if you want to drink, or you want to have some fruits, or whatever it is, after the Seudah Mafseket, it is still permissible. So once again, for Seudah Mafseket, you can have that one cooked food, whatever that food is, but you can have as much bread as you want, fresh fruits, vegetables, things of that nature. That is mutar. So that's with regards to today.